Just 1 week after gaining a member, the Vision has lost another. We're also going to see what is up with Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins and more. Starting things off with the Vision, because they've got a lot of new things going on with them. Starting, of course, with the big recent addition of Maxxine. There's been some new reports going around talking about what exactly to expect from Maxxine and her role in the group. Well, according to these new reports, Maxxine may still wrestle from time to time in the future, but how, allegedly, she's mostly going to be in a manager role for the Vision. That's going to be her main role in the group going forward. It really seems like Maxxine really could be the shot caller and a real strategic member of the group. It didn't take long at all for us to see Maxxine's skills on display. After the Alpha Academy came out there with Otis getting ready to confess his feelings for Maxxine, she distracted Otis and made it seem like she was sharing those same feelings. But it was all a ruse to set up the rest of the Vision to get a jump on the Alpha Academy and take them out. And Maxxine's plan was perfectly executed and left the Vision standing tall over the Alpha Academy. So, pretty successful night for Maxxine's first real week as a member of the Vision. She came up with a solid plan that was perfectly executed. Now, although it was a pretty successful night for the group, they did suffer a really big loss just a few moments later in a backstage segment. This segment included Paul Heyman and the Vision bumping into each other. And Austin Theory asked Paul Heyman if they were all back together with the recent success they've been having, if it was enough to get Paul Heyman fully back on board. And Heyman's response to that was that Maxxine was so spectacular that they don't even really need him anymore. So Heyman walked away from the Vision right there in that segment. Well, that left things in a pretty weird spot for both Paul Heyman and the Vision. And judging strictly based off of this segment right here, it seems like Paul Heyman's removed himself as a member of the Vision. Now, Paul Heyman hasn't really been happy with the Vision for a really long time. Even after they won the tag team titles a few weeks ago, Paul Heyman was glad, but he didn't give Braun and Austin much credit. Paul Heyman gave all the credit for that championship win to Maxxine. And now, here, for the second week in a row, Paul Heyman once again gives the credit to Maxxine for setting up the perfect trap for the Alpha Academy to walk into. So for 2 weeks in a row, Maxxine was actually the one who impressed Paul Heyman the most and really got things done in a big way. So it seems like from seeing Maxxine leading them to a tag team titles victory and setting up this perfect trap for their rivals, Paul Heyman's seen enough, and he's passing the managing torch of the Vision to Maxxine Dupri, with Heyman basically telling the Vision they don't need him because Maxxine's getting major things done for them. Now, maybe there's a swerve in this story and the Vision does something really major to pull Paul Heyman back into the group, but judging strictly based off of the July 13th backstage moment, it kind of appears that Paul Heyman's fully done with the Vision and he's not going to be affiliated with them anymore going forward. Which a lot of fans don't exactly blame him for, because everyone feels like the Vision's been, they've been slipping down the card for a while. Even in current day, it looks like their big new rival is the Alpha Academy. So not exactly the upper card stuff that Paul Heyman's used to being affiliated with. So maybe that's why right now is really the perfect time for Paul Heyman to just fully disconnect from the group. It was a decent idea, but the Vision never really took off, and so it's his time now to just cut the losses and move on. But if Paul Heyman really is done with the Vision, then this has fans wondering about, okay, what's next for Paul Heyman in his on-screen role? Sure, he still has Brock Lesnar for the next few weeks, so he's going to be occupied with the Brock and Oba build-up. But with Brock's WWE status being in limbo after SummerSlam, what's Paul Heyman going to do if Brock really does decide to retire? Where does that leave Paul Heyman? Will Paul Heyman retire from his on-screen role, or are they going to find something new for him to do? Will he return to the Vision after the Brock and Oba program concludes? There's also been some rumblings about Paul Heyman sticking with Braun Breaker after the Vision splits up, so maybe that's still a long-term plan for Paul Heyman? Nothing but a lot of major questions here right now for Paul Heyman's status, considering that it seems like he just left the Vision, and also how Brock is on the brink of retirement. So, gonna have to wait and see what's the next big role for Paul Heyman. But as of this moment, it appears that Maxxine Dupri was brought into the group to replace Paul Heyman. So, Heyman's out, and Maxxine's in. And so far, so good for Maxxine. She's had 2 successful weeks of causing success for the Vision. And now, I guess we're just going to have to see if she can get that trend going as time continues on. Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins had a contract signing for their big Summerslam match. And this segment did, I think, a great job of getting those fans that were on the fence about this feud to buy back in and get invested again. Because the first few segments for the SummerSlam match, they were getting kind of mixed reactions from fans because it was starting to feel, a little repetitive with all of the things that we've been hearing plenty of times before. Seth's going to come out there and make fun of Roman's part-time schedule. He's going to say how Roman's never beat him. He's going to bring up a mention of the Shield. It's very formulaic. No new content there at all. Just things that we've all heard before, right? And then Seth's solo promo from the week prior, that just came off as someone who's a hater and is jealous. So it's just 2 weeks of questionable segments that had fans feeling kind of iffy about the whole story behind this matchup. But, thankfully, the contract signing saved the feud and got it back on track. Now, Seth, he hit all the usual beats. He mentioned how Roman's never beat him, how Roman never shows up to work. But it was Roman that really brought the new content this time around. Roman took a lot of heavy blows towards Seth. The fact he called him injury prone and how he's always getting hurt when he's a world champion. Roman also made mention of how a lot of these world title reigns also came from cheap Money in the Bank cash-ins. Roman even obliterated Seth for needing to fake an injury just to use the Money in the Bank contract. Roman even took some light, indirect jabs at Triple H and WWE management for giving Seth Rollins all of this stuff and material, such as Paul Heyman and a faction around him, but how Seth failed with those things because he's simply not a number one guy, how he's a number two. Roman undoubtedly won the war of words here during this contract signing, and he ripped Seth Rollins apart. Now, since Roman got the advantage verbally, Seth got the advantage physically and took out Roman Reigns in order to close out the show. One of the things that Seth was yelling at Roman during the segment, and something that the fans were saying as well, was the question of, where was the Bloodline? Why didn't they save Roman? And the answer to that question appears to be that, they're just keeping their storylines separated right now. The rest of the Bloodline, they're pretty busy right now having their 6-man tag team match, so they're kind of occupied. But you can also argue that maybe within this kayfabe storyline world, Roman personally requested for the Bloodline not to go out there, no matter what. Obviously, this is a personal issue between Roman and Seth, and Roman wants to handle it by himself and prove to himself and others that he can beat Seth on his own. If Roman has the Bloodline come out there to save him from Seth, then this is only going to fuel Seth's narrative even more that Roman can't beat him personally and needs the help of his entire family. So that, in my opinion, seems to be the storyline reason why the Bloodline didn't come out to save Roman Reigns. Roman wanted to do all of this by himself. And that's been kind of a recurring theme of Roman's title reign so far. Roman, he got a lot of flack for his prior world title reign for always including outside interference from his family. It was just a guaranteed part of every single Roman Reigns title defense. But so far in his 2026 world title reign, Roman has not had any outside help at all in his title defenses. And maybe, just maybe, that trend's going to continue at SummerSlam. In order to silence the Seth Rollins narrative for good, Roman feels like he needs to defeat Seth Rollins with no outside interference at all. That's the only way. We'll see. But anyway, what are your thoughts on today's stories? Leave your comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe with all notifications on, and make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, guys.